We are joined by our Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Secretary Pompeo, I want to jump right to it because this is probably surprising news to a lot of people in the midst of the Olympics and all the stories around that. It's gotten blurbs, but it has not gotten the attention it deserves. So on Friday, surprise, surprise, the Biden administration announces they're granting some sanctions relief. That alone is pretty shocking to the Iranians. But here's what's more shocking. The kind of sanctions relief in the form of waivers related to civilian nuclear activity. Why is the Biden administration now removing any sanctions from Iran? That's because they won't go to the negotiating table, really. But the second is nuclear sanctions, really? I mean, that's what we're going to start lifting, Secretary Pompeo?
Jordan, you've asked me to explain, frankly, the unexplainable. I can't wrap my head around it. I try to be generous and think through why someone might have done it. And anyone who's negotiated anything, whether you're trying to purchase a used car or just simply get your children to do what you want them to do, you don't give them a gift with nothing in expectation of return, right? This just doesn't work. And that's what they did here. This reeks of desperation. American diplomats are headed back to Vienna this week. They're going to try and cut this deal to protect what President Obama had done during his time, this nuclear deal, which guaranteed a pathway for a nuclear weapon. The ramifications are really deep. For the Israelis, they'll now confront an Iran that not only has a nuclear weapons program, but money and wealth. They'll likely release some $29 billion in frozen funds that the Trump administration had frozen, giving the Iranians the ability to do lots more work, lots more terror. And we should never forget, this is the same regime that held Americans hostage for 444 days before President Reagan came into office.
You know, Mike, one of the things that I'm deeply concerned about, and Harry Hutchinson, our director of policy, and I were just talking about this during the break to our online audiences, and that is why in the world they would do this while, this is all going on. I mean, you've got the Middle East situation has improved so drastically when you were in office because of the Abraham Accords. And then I look back at negotiators are coming back into Vienna, the United States saying this is a make or break session to get a deal with Iran, and then you get the sanction waivers going at the same time. So what I'm trying to figure out is, do they want a deal so badly to get back into what President Obama had done previously that they will do anything at this point? How? In other words, what else could that? You're releasing $29 billion. You are giving them civilian nuclear activity. What else could you possibly do?
Jay, there's still more sanctions they could give up, but their leverage, the leverage that was provided to them when they came into office, they've basically, you described, thrown it away. This has deep ramifications too. More broadly, it's bad for Iran. It's bad for the Middle East. Your point about the Abraham Accords is exactly spot on. If you're the next country thinking about making friends with Israel, and the American administration is playing footsie with the Iranians, you're less likely to recognize Israel as the rightful Jewish homeland. This is also being watched by Putin and Xi and Chairman Kim. They can see that if you negotiate with the Americans and just hang on for a bit, they'll give you what you want. It's incomprehensible to me to think that the Biden administration could have believed this would further America's interest vis Iran or any place else in the world.
It seems like it would have furthered the interest, though, of China and Russia and other European companies who are willing to turn a blind eye. And we've seen German companies who were sometimes responsible for building some of these early nuclear facilities into the mountains and helping build those. But then at a time when we were talking about Chinese genocide and the Olympics, and that kind of focus, there's even the focus about where did that Uyghur athlete go who was in the opening ceremonies, has not been, the press hasn't had an opportunity to speak to her. But at the same time, we're talking about more sanctions on Russia. We have, because of Ukraine specifically, we're going to be sanctioning Russia, but at the same time opening up an entire new financial incentive for them in Iran.
These are all deeply connected. The world saw Xi and Putin stand together at the opening of the Genocide Olympics. We saw them cozying up to each other, essentially posing a challenge to the West, to the United States, and to Europe, and to India, and to Japan and South Korea, saying, all right, here's our team. This is what we look like. This is what authoritarianism looks like. This is what the denial of basic human rights. This is what the denial of any religious freedom. This is what it looks like. What are you prepared to do about it? And when the answer to that is allow them to shut down a pipeline here in the United States where gasoline flowed, do nothing, to let them build Nord Stream 2 and put Europe more at risk, and now to hand the Iranians a gift. I think these dictators, these bad guys, think they can run the house. And I pray that that's not the case for these next 3 years.
You have a piece up at the at ACLJ.org. The Biden administration's weakness is on full display in Ukraine. There are conflicting signals coming out of the administration on all of this. I am perplexed, to say the least, of whether it's something we really think is imminent. This morning it was imminent. Over the weekend they said maybe not so imminent, but then Jake Sullivan said, oh, imminent. Could be any day now, but that's not imminent. That's what Jen Psaki's answers to that is, well, that doesn't necessarily mean imminent. What do you think we're actually looking at here? Is Putin going to make a move, and is there going to be any response at that point, or should the responses be now?
Let me take them in reverse order. We should have established deterrence before. It's awful late in the game to try and get back on our front foot. To catch up is really, really hard when it comes to deterring someone like Vladimir Putin. Second, I haven't seen the latest intelligence. I don't have access to that anymore. But for all the world, it looks like Vladimir Putin is going to be enormously coercive. The number of soldiers, their preparedness, the amount of equipment that's moved not only into Western Russia, but into Belarus, what's happening in the Black Sea with the Russian Navy. That looks like Vladimir Putin's going to extract something from the West, whether that's some piece of Ukraine or a deal in Syria or a bunch of money that has been frozen or somebody's sanctions lifted. I don't know what his ask will be in the end, but boy, this is something I don't think Vladimir Putin would have done had he known that he had an administration in America that was prepared to lead.
You know, our European Center for Law and Justice, Secretary Pompeo, kind of final question for you. We just did some reports on specific countries that we believe the Human Rights Council needs to pay attention to. One of those, of course, top of the list, Afghanistan. But the reason why we focus on Afghanistan is the significant change, how it's going backwards so quickly. And we focused in on an open doors report. For 10 years, North Korea has been the number one abuser of specifically of Christians' human rights. They've been number one, the worst, for a decade. No one even came close. And in less than a year, Afghanistan has taken that unfortunate place as the number one worst place in the world to live as a Christian. And I think it underscores the way the withdrawal occurred by the Biden administration and empowering the Taliban has led to this disaster now for Christians living in Afghanistan.
Jordan, I don't think for one moment President Biden and his team considered the human rights ramifications of the departure. I think they were simply determined to get out willy-nilly, no conditions, just we're going to go, and whatever happens after that, not my problem. I think President Biden hasn't mentioned Afghanistan in months in a formal setting to a group to talk about the things that they're working on. We know there's still Americans and those who supported America who were there. I'm working with a group of folks to try and help get them out.
Yep.
And you're right. Christian persecution in Afghanistan today rivals North Korea. And what's happening in Nigeria to Christians,
yes.
This is one of the most dangerous places in the world for Christians. And the United States has not done its basic duty to do all that it could to protect them.
And Secretary Pompeo, we filed also at the UN on Nigeria, as well as the situation in Afghanistan. We have an office in Pakistan and report on those cases. Thank you for your insight, as always. Again, folks, this is why you support the work of the ACLJ. We're not just talking about it, we're taking action.